Wonderful. Well, I think we will go ahead and get the ball rolling. We are really grateful for your time. We have an action-packed hour for you. I know folks are still arriving. This is recorded if anything is missed, but I'm going to go ahead and get started to maximize our time together today. So hello, really warm welcome to all of you joining us today. My name is Katy Hogan, and I'm a director of workforce programs here at the Partnership for Public Service. I focus on early career talent here at the partnership, and I've been here for just about 4 years. Prior to joining the partnership, I actually worked in higher education for nearly a decade, and I provided students and alumni with career coaching, both individually and in group settings. So I'm really comfortable and skilled with all things career development, whether that is resume, cover letter, interview prep, networking, and then of course today's topic, salary negotiation. I really enjoy these topics, and I will do my best to share the gems that I've gathered along the way. Real quickly, for those of you that may be unfamiliar with the Partnership for Public Service, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit committed to building a better government and a stronger democracy. We do that in a number of ways, mostly through policy advocacy, leadership development trainings and programmings, workforce programming, and convening leaders across organizations and sectors. The most tangible impact is seen through our support of the federal workforce by sharing resources, providing plain language explainers, and amplifying the stories of the incredible work that federal employees do for our country every day. I just want to say on behalf of all of us, we thank you for your service. Civil servants are so critical and core to our democracy, and everyone at the partnership recognizes and honors that. So thank you. We also, about a year ago, started providing our FedSupport resources. We are dropping our FedSupport.org link in the chat. Of course, these webinars fall under our FedSupport as well as many other opportunities. One I would like to spotlight really quickly, because it is a very deep dive into career development, exploration, pivot, is our Career Pivot Bootcamp. So this dropped about a year ago, but this bootcamp includes 7 modules on different career topics, such as your skills assessment, networking, resume refinement, how to prepare for an interview in the private sector. It is completely free to you, so please do take advantage if you've not already. You can click through the link in the chat to learn more and sign up. And if you need any assistance signing up, please do not hesitate to reach out. We are happy to help you. Again, that is a completely free deep dive resource. Okay, so I want to share a few notes today before digging into our conversation and introducing my wonderful co-facilitator and special guest speaker. So throughout this webinar, please feel free to submit any questions you have through the Q&A function, and we will do our best to answer what we can. Please just note, given the complexity and nuance of the topics we discuss, we may not be able to address every question or associated circumstance that comes up, but we will continue to host FedSupport webinars and town halls like this one on a regular basis so we can continue to dig into topics and support you. If you miss a talking point or want to revisit a portion of this conversation, you can view this conversation as well as our other past webinars on our FedSupport Hub and YouTube channel. We'll put those links in the chat. Okay, so all right, there's our slides. Wonderful. There's the Career Pivot Bootcamp. We'll get that link in the chat. So today's agenda: job search and personal brand. So salary negotiation is inextricably linked to your job search and how you define your brand. So we will make sure to talk about that. We'll talk about how to set those salary expectations. We'll talk about what you can negotiate. Teaser, it's not just the dollar amount of your salary. And we'll also talk about how to negotiate at every phase. We are so excited and honored to have an industry expert, Sara Zachary. So we're going to have a wonderful conversation with her, as well as feature any questions and get answers to what's on your mind. Before we start our discussion, I want to introduce my co-facilitator, Kristen Carroll. Kristen?
Thank you, Katy, and hi, everyone. Happy to be with you here this afternoon. Very similar to Katy, my background is in career development and professional development support. So I'm coming from higher ed. I've been with the partnership for almost 2 years. I work on our early career talent team, but I also do a lot of work, which I am very fortunate to do with our FedSupport umbrella of work, including Career Pivot Bootcamp and our Career Pivot coaching. So I'll make sure you have access to both of those links in the chat. But as I mentioned, prior to coming to the partnership, I was in higher ed for 12 years in career development, supporting students and alumni through the full pipeline of their search all the way through the negotiation process. Excited to share more later. Also want to just shout out our colleague Anushka, who's on the call. He'll be managing the chat, raising questions that you have for us and for Sara, and also sharing resources along the way. And Katy, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, so we know it's early in the week, it's Tuesday, so we want to get started with a quick optional and anonymous poll just to sort of level set and see how you all are feeling about your own salary negotiation thinking and experience. So again, this is totally optional. It's going to be really quick, but we're going to do what's called a Menti. So if you want to grab that QR code, and I'll give everyone a moment to arrive to the Menti. And again, it's optional, just a few minutes, but I think a fun way to engage. You can also go to menti.com and enter that code 855-48127. I see folks already responding, which is exciting. But this first question, which of the following resonates most with you and why? What brought you here today? So I'm seeing I am not confrontational. I am scared to negotiate a salary. That's really reasonable. I hear that all the time. I'm concerned they will think I'm greedy or will rescind the offer. That's also a common fear we hear all the time. Yeah. Okay. I'm seeing a balance. It seems like there's a little something for everyone, but most common concerns about perception, if they'll think you're greedy or will rescind the offer, and that you do not feel confrontational. I'll just say, you'll hear this throughout the webinar. Salary negotiation is not a confrontation, it's a conversation. So I think that's a really useful reframe if you're one of the folks feeling like, gosh, I'm not confrontational. And yes, negotiation outside of government is different. So we'll talk about that too. Thank you all. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to the second question. I appreciate this engagement now that we're rocking and rolling. Okay, so what have you done so far when you have received an offer? Maybe you have an offer now or thinking in the past. So what has salary negotiation perhaps looked like in your last offer situation or just in general? What have you done when you receive an offer? What have you done when you've received an offer? Okay, so maybe the QR code is not working. Let's see. It doesn't look like it's quite as active as the last one, which I'm sure is on us. Okay, there we go. Okay, I love to see negotiated successfully. It's okay if you feel like you tried and it wasn't successful. It's likely that elements of it were successful, but maybe just not the way we thought. It's okay if you did not try to negotiate. I know it can be difficult. Okay, this one also shows pretty great diversity in how folks are showing up today. I honor all of these responses and we will make space and address all of them throughout our time today. Okay, these are all meaningful answers. And we're going to go to one third and final question. I thank you all for sharing. What part of salary negotiation feels most difficult for you? Knowing what number to ask for, how to start the conversation, fear of damaging the relationship, saying that actual number out loud, that can be a big jump, and then negotiating beyond that salary. Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about how to figure out your number. Again, I never like to bury a lead. We recommend a range rather than a singular number, but we'll talk more about that. We'll talk about the tactical for how to actually set up the conversation. And we'll absolutely talk about what's negotiable beyond just that salary. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for that. This is so helpful. I appreciate you all for sharing. We're going to get into the content now, but this is really helpful for me as the facilitator. Okay, so we have a lot of content. You're going to notice I'm moving really quickly because we want to get to our Q&A with our industry expert, Sara. As I shared, job search and personal brand is where we start because it's a strong foundation for your salary negotiation. And what we mean by this is really high level, those questions: who are you and what is it that you bring to the table? So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about your value statement and a roadmap you can use. I know this slide looks really text heavy, but it's really important when you start a job search or a career pivot or a new conversation about who you are and where you might like to be professionally. Really important to think about these questions. We call it a roadmap. You can also adjust it for your industry, for yourself. But in general, it's really important when seeking a new role to know, how does your value align with this particular position? What past accomplishments or results did you drive that specifically align with this role? What is most relevant in terms of your transferable skills? So what are you seeing in this job description or the needs of the employer that you can transfer from previous experiences? What benefits or results in your highlighted skills did you bring to your previous employer? So what did you drive? What outcomes? What results? What did you do that brought a lot of value? What do your previous supervisors say about you? And what accomplishments or actions have you taken that have made a positive and tangible impact in your career? So again, this is a roadmap. This is so important for a number of reasons, but this also sets a strong tone and foundation for a salary negotiation. And if we go to the next slide, these are just a different way to think about the last slide and how to set a strong value statement in succinct but meaningful way to convey your past experience. So I know you're all doing this, but just as a friendly reminder, consider your past work experiences. What are your unique perspectives as a result of them? What makes you you? What makes you special? What do you bring? Any certifications you may have. So perhaps you are a project manager and you have your PMP. That's a super important thing to highlight. Trainings. What unique trainings have you undergone as part of your professional career that may be of interest to this specific position or employer? Of course, any degrees or educational experience and credentials. So you all know that, but just reminding you, these all set the strong foundation for your salary negotiation. And next, if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about why it's important to be clear on your value statement. You know, why does this matter? Why are we spending time on it in this webinar? You want to connect and align with the desired skills of the position. So essentially, when you see a position description or a job application, that is an ad for what they are seeking. So you want to connect and align with what they are seeking to make a compelling argument for why they should interview you. You want to connect or align with their mission or the company's bottom line. And you want to set yourself up for a strong interview and eventually a strong and compelling salary negotiation conversation. So with that, I'd like to pass things to Kristen Carroll, who's going to continue the job search and salary negotiation discussion.
Thank you, Katy. So next, we're going to talk about the salary negotiation process throughout your job search process. We'll talk about your research phase, also what happens when you have a first round interview, all the way through to actually receiving an offer. Because it is very important to note that your salary research is beginning with your job search. It's happening in tandem with your search process, and you should not leave this research until you receive an actual offer to begin considering what your number is, your value proposition, and whether or not their range is in alignment with your desired salary for that role. So as you're searching for a job, obviously it's easy if the position description has a salary range posted, and many more states are starting to require that employers do post publicly a salary or salary range for a role. So that's incredibly helpful if that information is already publicly available. If that information is not available in a job description, that's when you have to do deeper research to understand what is the typical salary for this type of role, for this type of employer or the sector. So whether that's private sector, nonprofits, higher ed, public sector, and then also geographically, what is an appropriate salary range for this role? On the next slide, we'll talk about where you can do that research, but we do want to note that it's so important as part of this research phase that you're saving job descriptions, because You may apply for something, several months later receive an interview, and then if that position's been pulled down, you no longer have it as a reference point to remember what the original salary range was. So highly recommend saving those documents, and also keeping in mind that there isn't a one-to-one ratio for types of roles in terms of salary. So a project manager at a small nonprofit may be compensated quite differently from a project manager at a large private sector organization. So you really have to keep in mind it's nuanced, and there are a lot of factors that go into a salary amount or range. So where exactly are you doing this research? We're going to come back to this first point in a bit, but you do not want to be the first person that gives a number. So we'll spend some more time talking about how you can navigate and deflect in that moment. But as part of your research, we talked about job postings and how it is, the law now in many states and localities that it has to be included. If it's not included, you can look at public databases. For any public facing jobs, including universities, those salary ranges are often posted. Salary.com is another resource where you can, search by specific organizations or role types. And then Glassdoor, just with the caveat that Glassdoor features self-reported salaries. So those are employees that are reporting the salary they received. It's not reported by the employer. So take it with a grain of salt that that information could vary. And also just keep in mind, when that salary was reported, and if it was several years ago, that range may have changed by now. Paycheck City is another resource. I think it's especially helpful if you already know the salary range or number, and then can put that in to determine what your actual take-home pay would be. So if you're trying to figure out the number that the employer has given, is that a workable number for you? And what would your actual take-home pay look like, factoring in taxes, benefits, specific to that region? You can also ask trusted mentors and friends as you feel comfortable. I'm someone who's very comfortable disclosing salary information with my close friends because I find it empowering to have access to that information. Not everyone is comfortable having that conversation, and that's okay. So you'll know your own boundaries, whether you feel comfortable having those more personal conversations around what could be expected in regard to salary. And on our next slide, we'll talk about the offer process. So we're almost getting there. You're still in your research phase. This is just wrapping up what you are hoping to understand through your research. So what do you ultimately need to accomplish to land on a number or range and feel informed? You want to understand that salary range. You also want to understand a fair market rate for that field and that city. So fair rate for the role, the field, the organization, and your geographic location. You also want to understand what is fair based on your skills and experience. You want to be compensated for all of that value that you're bringing to the role that Katy talked about. But this is a very important point. Your personal budget has no role in salary negotiation. So while you may have a dream number in mind that you would love to make, and you could even feel that number is very fair based on your prior experience and skills, that number has to be grounded in the reality of the fair market rate. Your salary history should also not play a role in negotiation, and this can work to your benefit. So it is also now illegal in several states for employers to request your salary history. So they cannot undercompensate you and pay you perhaps at the lower end of a range based on what you were previously making. Essentially, they should be compensating you for what the role requires and the experience you bring, not what you've previously made. And know those rights. So, do a quick Google search, look up, what are your rights in your state or in your city to protect you in the job market, especially as it pertains to salary negotiation. And on the next slide. So at the start, we're getting, closer to, you're going to have that interview. You may be asked about salary. Just know the range for the individual role, know that fair market range, determine your personal salary range. So as Katy mentioned, you want to give a range and not a specific number. And you want that range to be anchored with your worst case scenario, essentially. What is the lowest amount that you would take? So if your, walk away amount is 100,000, you would not give the employer a range of 80 to 120,000 because you wouldn't want to accept 80, you want 100. So instead your range could be, 100 to 110, 100 to 120. It's always anchored with that lowest number being what you hope to end up with. And then understand what your walkaway point is. What is the absolute lowest you would take? And that's going to vary based on the job and how other benefits, we're considering total compensation, not just the salary. So there are other considerations that you would have in regard to your walkaway point, and that number could change. And we'll talk more about that. Next, other factors that could influence. Is this your dream job? Is this a job that you would just be so thrilled to show up every day? You've always wanted to do this work. It is exceptionally meaningful to you. Perhaps you're willing to take a lower salary. What are your motivations? Are you in a really unhealthy work climate currently? And it is worth it to you to be in a healthier environment, to take on a new role. And so you're willing to perhaps consider a lower salary. How long you've been looking, that could play in. There are the realities of the job search that you have expenses, you want to continue working, so you may be more willing to consider a lower offer, and also your phase in life. So are you in a phase in your life where you are trying to really grow your income? Are you in a phase where you feel pretty stable and don't need to have that growth mindset? And that's going to be very personal, all of these factors to everyone as they consider their search and also their salary limits. So what is negotiable? And I do think we maybe have skipped over a few slides that covered the actual offer process. So I want to make sure we get back to those, but I'll go ahead and talk through what exactly is negotiable. So compensation, we mentioned it's total compensation. It is not simply the salary. These are all areas where you can negotiate. I'm not going to go into each of them in detail, but of course, if you have questions, please bring them to our Q&A portion. So for example, 401k or other type of retirement plan, is the employer able to match? Do they match up to a certain percentage? Are they willing to increase that percentage of their match? Health insurance and benefits, that's often something folks think that is not an opportunity to negotiate, but I have seen previous colleagues successfully negotiate for a part-time role that did not traditionally come with benefits. They negotiated for a lower salary rate for that part-time role, but to then have health insurance and other benefits included, because it was more of a priority for them at that life phase to have guaranteed health insurance, and they were willing to accept a lower salary. Paid time off, that is another big one. If they have a blanket number of 15 PTO days annually, are you able to adjust that? Are they willing to give a bonus? That could be a sign-on bonus. That could be a bonus, 6 months into your role at year end. Stock options, if you were in a sector that offers that. Commuter benefits, perhaps your employer, offers $100 a month in commuter benefits. Are they willing to increase that number to offset your commuter costs? And then workplace flexibility. Is it a 5-day in office role? Is it a hybrid role? Are you able to negotiate instead of coming into the office 3 days, you come in 2 days? Or would they consider a 4-day-a-week schedule for 10-hour days instead of 5 8-hour days? These are, there's lots of other configurations, all things that are on the table. And Anushka, if we're able to go back a few slides, Oh, I'm sorry, we're all caught up to where we should be. This is the slide I was hoping to touch on. So going now into the interview phase, you are most likely to be asked about salary either at the phone screen or first interview phase, and then when you receive an offer ultimately. I once had a first round interview where literally the first question they asked, we said hello, exchanged pleasantries, and then they said, "What is your salary expectation for this role?" And it was very jarring to have that right out the gate. So you, as much as possible, want to deflect. You do not want to be the person to give a number first. If the range was posted, you at least have that as a reference point. But even if you do have that number, and especially if you do not have that number, if the range was not posted publicly, ask them. And I think these are three great, appropriate, warm questions that show you're really engaged and you're putting it on them. So that I can answer your question, can you please share what you have budgeted for this position? Can you share the range that you would typically pay for someone in this role? And let them know I'm seeking a fair market rate for this role. I'd like to learn more about the role so that I can assess what a fair market rate would be. So you're putting it on them. You're letting them know, like, I'm doing my research. I want to make sure I'm compensated fairly, and allow them the space to respond to your questions. Next up, once you receive an offer, so we saw some of your feedback in the mentee about, if you have attempted to negotiate, if you were successful, or maybe felt that you weren't successful. It is, I think, expected that you will negotiate. And I just had a friend receive a job offer last week. They offered her the top of the posted range, and she texted me and said, "They offered me the top number. Should I negotiate?" And I said, "Yes, you absolutely should. Here's how to do it." And we talked about a lot of the strategies, the total compensation, other things that you could consider asking for, even though they came in at the top of the range. So, no matter what the offer is, you don't have to accept it on the spot. And I think often that initial offer may come via a phone call. You want to keep it warm, enthusiastic. I'm so excited about this opportunity. I'm so grateful. I would just love some time to consider the full benefits package and the full offer. And then usually that offer will come via email. So it is absolutely appropriate, while you're on the phone, if they did phone you, just to ask for a few more days. If it's a Friday through the weekend is usually appropriate. You'll get back to them early Monday or close of business Monday. I would say like 24 to 48 hours is a good range from when you receive the offer to be able to consider. Ask to review the full benefits package in writing. So while they may verbally offer you, you also want to get it in writing, and you want to make sure they're sending you that full package. I will flag, especially for health insurance and benefits, they'll often just send a one pager that will show you the different plan options and then the per paycheck cost for that plan. I always follow up to see if there's the full brochure that they can send, so you can see cost by service. If you know that there are certain, prescriptions or, different procedures that you need on an annual basis, make sure you have that full list so you can really weigh what those benefits are. You want all the information. And then let them know that you would love to schedule a time just to follow up if you have questions. That ideally is when you're negotiating as part of that follow-up conversation, not the initial conversation. As Katy mentioned, it is a conversation. It's not a confrontation. I think most HR professionals are expecting you to negotiate. You want to start with salary. I think ultimately that's where we want to get, is to that number that you've researched, your value, the fair market rate, but also be prepared to talk through some other benefits that we discussed a few slides ago, and just understand what may and may not be negotiable. I'm going to run through the next few quickly just for the sake of time so we can get to Sara. A lot of this is recap from themes that we've already talked about. So you just want to make sure going into that negotiation, But you have your strategy, you are well researched, it's grounded in the reality of the market and your skills. I think it's really helpful to write out your pitch. You're always starting with gratitude. So you're thankful for the opportunity, you're excited about the opportunity and to work with this team. You then reiterate your value. So what is unique about you? What are you bringing that other candidates, you're above and beyond, how you really align with the role and the mission. It's grounded in your skills and experience. And then you make that ask, my range for this position or my number for this position is, and give that number. And then also just be ready to go based on what they say with those other benefits. And then, of course, give them space to respond. Don't keep talking. People often tend to get nervous, and so they'll keep filling the space. Like, give them your reasoning, give them your number, and give them space to respond. So in summary, you are just sticking to the facts. This is the value you bring. This is the salary you need. Again, that is not the salary you would love to have aspirationally, but grounded in the reality of the market and your skills. And then based on that research, this is my number. So what if they say that it isn't negotiable? You can absolutely push back. They may push back. Trust your gut, read, the situation. You'll have had a few interactions with them at that point. You can best determine, do I want to keep pushing? Do I want to try and negotiate for other benefits besides salary? Does it feel like it's time to either accept the offer or to respectfully decline? Ask those benefit questions. Also ask about how promotions work. That might be another opportunity for you in the near or short term to have additional compensation. So understand that performance review process and what may be available to you. And of course, get everything in writing. Final reminders here before we get to Sara. So again, most employers are expecting you to negotiate, and you typically have the most leverage at the offer stage. So we don't encourage you to just accept the first offer and then see if you can negotiate for more down the road, a few months into the role or by year end. It's usually a lot harder at that phase. So definitely leverage that offer stage of the process. And then I think we've covered all these already. We can go ahead and probably leave this slide up as we transition over to our panel. But yeah, know your rights, do your research, know your value, consider all benefits, and have a conversation, not a confrontation. And with that, I will pass it back to Katy to introduce Sara.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. And for our participants, we know that that was a quick bit of content. Just a friendly reminder, this is recorded and we want to make space for all of the wonderful questions. I thank you all for the questions that are being sent in. A friendly reminder to continue to navigate to the Q&A function to submit your question and we will try to answer it. But now I would really like to provide a warm welcome to Sara Zachary, MBA. Sara is a talent director at a global consulting firm and generously giving us her time as a industry expert in all things salary negotiations. So I wanted to start by asking a couple of questions to Sara, and then my colleagues and I will watch the chat and get some of your questions answered too. But Sara, thank you again for being here. And to get us started, could you please share more about what resonated most in the content that we just very quickly shared and what you would really like to reiterate to our audience today?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here with you all. And thank you, Kristen and Katy, for having me. I think a couple of things that resonated a lot with me. One are around not feeling afraid to negotiate and approaching it collaboratively. By the time an organization has extended you an offer, they have spent time in the interview process. There are people who have gotten to know you, who are really excited about your skills and experience and what you'll bring to the table. By the time they extend you the offer, they want you to say yes and accept. And there are people there that want you to take the role. And so I'd really think about it as, how can you work together with them to make the role work for you? They are not hoping that you are going to say no and walk away. They are hoping that you want to say yes. And I would really think about the negotiation as, how can you work together with them to get to a place where you feel comfortable saying yes and accepting the role and contributing all that you have to their organization.
That's awesome. Yeah. And anytime I was coaching someone on a salary negotiation, I remind them it is so time and resource intensive to bring somebody on. So by the time that you get the offer, they really do want you to take it. So there is some leverage there. So thank you for that, Sara. In your extensive experience and background in human resources, what tactics allow a job seeker to be most successful in that salary negotiation? Like, what have you seen that really works?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that you and Kristen covered in the presentation are a lot of the advice I would give. I think touching on my previous point, waiting until you have the offer in hand to start the negotiation, because at that point you will know that they want you. You will know kind of what number they've started with. You won't unintentionally anchor to a range that's lower than what they had in mind. And that's the point when you can collaborate with them to get to yes. So deflect politely and warmly earlier on in the process and wait till you have that offer. Really make the negotiation conversation feel collaborative and not confrontational. Express why you're excited about the role. Like, remind them you really want to make this work and give concrete reasons of why, because I think sometimes it's easier to be open to negotiations when people feel like you really do want the job and aren't just making it about the money. Don't make it feel transactional. Make it feel like you genuinely are thrilled to be able to take the role. And then a few more sort of tactical things going beyond just the approach. One thing is asking about the title and leveling. Generally, similar to in government, where there's salaries that tie to the different bands. Generally, within companies, they have their own bands, and sometimes your pay range can be capped by what band that you have been assigned to based on their internal leveling system. And so you can ask them, what level would I be coming in at? How have you determined that leveling? Is there a possibility for me to be brought in at a higher level? Because that can sometimes allow them internally to move you up to a higher salary band. And then a couple other pieces to consider, as Kristen was saying, there's a lot of pieces of the compensation. So think about the total value of the compensation package, both financial and intangible things like commute time or flexibility. Think about what you really value and what things you might be willing to trade off to get what is most important to you. And then I always encourage people in the private sector to ask about a signing bonus as well. And that can sometimes be a good thing if they haven't offered it in the beginning, to wait until the end. So after you've negotiated on salary, and if there's anything else, I think generally it can never hurt to say, thank you for working with me on this. I feel really good about the number that we've reached for the salary. I'm really excited to accept. Is there any way you can offer a signing bonus as well? Sometimes that's discretionary budget that companies have, and if someone asks for it, they generally say yes. So I think in a kind way and not a greedy way, you can ask for that at the end, and that will be an additional add-on. That the signing bonus doesn't impact your compensation over time. It's not your annual salary, but can sometimes be a few $1,000s in that first year, which makes a difference.
All great tips. Greatly appreciate it. So I asked what tactics are most effective. Are there any common missteps you see in salary negotiations, or maybe roadblocks that you've seen job seekers face?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one, honestly, is not negotiating. That is, most companies expect you to negotiate. And so if you don't negotiate, you're often leaving money on the table. I mean, there are certain companies that may say off the bat that they don't negotiate. Usually they would be upfront about that. Large consulting firms, that type of thing, may have sort of certain levels that they bring people in. But I think for most jobs, not negotiating is the biggest mistake. And then a couple others, also things we talked about previously, anchoring to your prior salary, especially for folks transitioning from public sector to private sector. There are different compensation expectations. So really think about the market for that job and not what you made before, so you don't unintentionally cap yourself. And then also not considering the full compensation package, that if there are different pieces of it, if you're only focused on the salary, but not thinking about other places that you might be able to negotiate on benefits or bonuses or stock, if that's available, you may not be thinking about the full value. So make sure that, anything you can quantify, do the math and figure out sort of what is the value of all these things that I'll be getting in a year, and then think about the intangibles that are important to you as well.
Thanks, Sara. All great information. Um, how can folks do effective salary negotiation research for non-public sectors? So I know some of our participants may be really comfortable and skilled with negotiating or understanding compensation in the federal or government sector. Where can folks find the most updated information? And I know we shared some, but we'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of the places that you all shared are great. Job posting for jobs you are looking at, and as you're looking, I would say even jobs you don't end up applying for, like if they are similar to the roles that you are looking at and you think they're comparable, take note of that and start building a little bit of your own personalized database of the ranges of roles that you're considering that you feel like are a good fit for your skill set and experience. There's lots of the websites, like Kristen mentioned, I think sort of a mix of reliability of those. One other thing you can do is use AI like ChatGPT to aggregate across those websites, because then you can quickly say like, I'm looking for jobs as a project manager at this type of company in this geography. Can you tell me salary ranges for this market? And they'll sort of pull in one place for you all of the different data points. And that also allows you to see sort of the range and to see if maybe Glassdoor is way off from what other websites are seeing. So I wouldn't trust that as 100% accurate, but can give you some guideposts for what's out there in a quick and easy way and save you some time on the research. And then again, as Kristen said, to the extent you're comfortable using your personal network, encourage you to use that as well. And I've found that there are sometimes ways to ask the question that feel a little bit less vulnerable or personal as well. If you have groups that you're part of, maybe alumni groups from one of your colleges or universities, former colleagues who are in your group with, putting something out like, I'm looking for info on salary for X type of role. Would anyone be willing to experience share on a range? You're not putting somebody on the spot to share their own salary, but maybe they've hired someone into that role or have knowledge. Or once you have an offer in hand, if you're comfortable sharing, saying, I've been offered X amount for this position. Is that within the range that you've typically seen? Again, you're not asking somebody to share their own compensation or the direct compensation of their direct reports, but can get a reaction from somebody and even somebody saying like, yeah, that feels roughly right. Maybe you could ask for a little bit more, or like, whoa, that seems really low compared to what I see, and I think you should be asking for higher, can help you gut check your range and the research you've done.
Excellent advice. So I want to pivot to some audience questions. So audience, thank you again. We have quite a few good questions that I'm going to try to get through. Please continue to send them our way via the Q&A. And these questions, would love to hear from Sara. Kristen, happy for you to weigh in too. First question, would you mind providing any tips you have for when salary expectation is included as a required question on the online application form? Meaning you are being asked to give it before the first round or recruiter conversation. And I'll just note, again, this is becoming less and less common because state and local laws prohibit it. But what would you say if someone is forced to give that?
Yeah, that is a great question. My personal approach and advice that somebody gave to me once was, you don't have to put something, you can put $0. I have put $0 myself on job applications. I think they're putting out this question because they're trying to gather information for when they are negotiating. But I generally, if you're a qualified candidate for the role, they're not going to rule you out because you put that. So I would say don't work against yourself. And even if it's required, just put $0.
Awesome. Kristen, anything to add? Okay, if not.
No, that is also what I've personally done and encourage others to do as well.
Awesome. Another question about salary ranges. Advice on how large a salary range should be, and can too large be negative? So I guess perhaps tied to how to do your research or your networking, but how to approach how big a salary range can or should be. And I will just say at the top, I think a range typically varies by job. I know that's labor intensive, but you want to do your research. You want to understand what's attainable at that nonprofit project manager role versus that private sector project management role, and adjust the range accordingly based on that fair market rate, based on your research and understanding. But in general, what would you say about ranges when constructing them, and how big can they be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I will jump in and then others should share. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule for exactly how big it should be, but I do think I would say sort of err a little bit on the side of smaller than larger. Like if you put, it makes you come across as more credible. If you put a range of like $50,000 to $200,000 in there, then it's hard for them to know, like, are you being serious? Have you actually done your research? I think you come across as more credible if you have a bit of a tighter range. So putting the bottom as kind of your anchor, the lowest you'd be willing to accept. And I would not put the top above what you have seen in your market research. If you haven't done any research to justify the top end of a range and you don't have a data point to back it up, I wouldn't put that there. So would really try to keep it a little bit more reasonable.
I'll also add, if it is a position that has posted a range, you can mirror how large their range is a bit when you're providing a range. And I've seen some employers post a range of $50,000, $60,000, which can be a big difference from that bottom number to the top. I've also seen position descriptions that give a large range of 60,000 and then a targeted amount. The targeted amount, in my experience, that is the number they're hoping to offer. The range itself can be a bit misleading and just something to keep in mind. Again, it's specific to each employer, but if they're giving 100 to 150,000 as their range, but then the targeted amount is 125, they're likely looking to offer 125 and not go far above that. So if 150 is your walkaway number, just know that going in, and that may inform the range that you want to give them in return.
Absolutely. I have a friend on the job market, and she is seeing more in job postings, pretty significantly large ranges, as you're describing, Kristen. But then they say, but this salary is typically landing at this number. And then I think that is what they're hoping to hire. So it's good for you to know. But we still always say negotiate, even if you were offered that exact number, that's the target, right? Okay, next question. I really appreciate you all for sending these. These are excellent. Is there a limit to the number of items you should try to negotiate? So should it be salary and one other thing that's of most importance to you, perhaps, or second and third thing? Should you try to negotiate everything all at once or one at a time? So how much should you be thinking to negotiate, and what is sort of the order of operations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I would make sure that you are clear on your priorities of what's important to you and would order your negotiation based on what is most important to you, because the last thing you would want to have happen is you ask for 5 things. One is really important to you. Maybe numbers 4 and 5 are not that important to you. They say, oh, we can give you number 4 and 5. They didn't know that 1 was the most important, and you end up in a place where you're not happy and maybe don't take the job, or take the job but don't feel good about it. So 1, do some reflection, think about what is most important to you. I would probably start the negotiation with, not hard and fast rule, but 2 things maybe to start, or 1, if it's really important to you, see what they come back with. If they come back and say yes on that one and you feel good about what you get, maybe ask for 1 more thing if it's important to you to flex. I think if you make an initial ask and they say no, that gives you a little bit more flexibility to go down your list. If you say, can we negotiate on my salary? And they say, no, there's absolutely no wiggle room on salary, then say, okay, can we talk about some other areas where there may be room for you to move? So I think the approach depends a little bit on the situation and how they respond, but most important is for you to do the reflection of what is most important to you and what's going to be most valuable to you, so that you can prioritize the conversation to get to a place where you feel good.
I agree wholeheartedly. I'd also say what matters most to you is likely going to vary based on your current life circumstance or phase of life. I know my old employer offered free tuition to all employees. So you could take classes, obtain a degree free of charge, which is wonderful at a flagship institution. And then your dependents, I believe, and spouses got 50% off tuition. So I knew people where I used to work who really desired a employment at that institution because they knew they had children that were, seniors in high school and angling to study there. So to get half tuition is quite a high value. It did often make folks willing to perhaps accept a lower or lateral salary from their current position. So it can really change based on where you're at in life as well. Kristen, anything to add?
I would just say it's a delicate balance between leaving the door open. So I agree with everything Sara said, like you're sending forth your top 1 to 2 priorities. You don't want to say too much about like if you're unable to move on these items, I'm open to additional discussion on these other items, because you really want to prioritize those top, 1 or 2. But you often also don't want to be so final in your language where you're like, this is it, I only want these 2 things. So just being careful. It definitely, language around negotiation is you want to be very thoughtful and keep it enthusiastic, but also keep it to the point. And that balance of like leaving the door open, but being firm on what it is you're asking for at the same time.
Yeah, wonderful. A bit of a difficult question, but would like your perspectives. And Kristen, it sounds like you had a friend who recently went through the process in this market. But in your mind, has negotiation leverage changed at all in this job market? Feels like there's a lot of competition. The market has been a little tricky and up and down in the last year or so. Have you still found there's room to negotiate or less room? How should prospective employees keep this in mind as they implement the recommended strategies from today's webinar?
I'm happy to go first and then have Sara weigh in. I think it is a saturated job market, but I think the same mentality applies that we shared. Like the employer has invested so much in the search and interview process that by the time you receive an offer, they want you. And I do think there is still leverage to negotiate. Where there may be less leverage, it depends on the employer's financials, which could have, shifted within the last few years. Perhaps it's an employer that formerly had more discretionary funding for spot bonuses, sign-on bonuses, whatever it may be. So the market may have shifted in that way, where the employer may have less funding to negotiate or less wiggle room internally. But I do still think it's worth you negotiating if your concern is this is a saturated market and I'm lucky to have this offer and I should just accept it. I don't think that's the right framing. I think that they are invested in you, they made the offer, you are highly skilled, and you should know the market value and still advocate and negotiate. And it could be if they can't move on salary, then that is where you turn to your other options.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think even in this market, they would still expect you to negotiate. They understand that that is an expectation. I don't think they're expecting applicants to change their approach. The worst they can say is no, or they can't give you the full thing you're asking for, or they want to turn to other options, but would still fully recommend negotiating.
Absolutely agree. We're moving into the final moments, so I want to make this our last question. But what is your top tip or key takeaway that I know we covered a lot? We had a lot of fabulous questions and content, but when it comes to salary negotiation, what is the one thing you'd like our participants to leave with from you?
Yeah, great question. I think I would probably say kind of do your research and feel confident in what you are asking for. If you have done your research and you have looked at how your skills and experience match to the job, and you know that they have offered you the job, so they know that you also are a good match for the job, don't feel embarrassed or ashamed or greedy for negotiating. Be confident in yourself and ask for the number. And then work with them to get where you are, but don't feel bad or embarrassed or scared to negotiate.
Good one, Kristen.
I agree with all of that, and it's hard to follow up or add on to something that hasn't been said. But I think it is just the confidence piece. I know it can be scary or intimidating to have this conversation. So finding ways to practice, especially if you anticipate having the counter offer over the phone. So whether that's just practicing with a friend, a peer, your pet, in the mirror, whatever format works for you, just to get comfortable saying the words out loud. And I think it's self-actualizing, right? It's self-fulfilling. So the more you say it out loud, the more you think about and talk about your value, your uniqueness, what you bring, it will sound more authentic. and effective when you ultimately are making the ask.
Wonderful. Mine is what I said at the beginning. Just remember, it's a conversation, not a confrontation. They expect you to negotiate. It's a part of doing business and talent acquisition. So please know that you are not confrontational and greedy for making a well-researched, well-reasoned ask based on your skills and experience. I'm going to cheat and harken back to a webinar. I'm going to have a second one. I'm going to harken back to a webinar that we had about a year ago, specifically for more senior job seekers, folks who were executive level in their career. It was great. We have all of our recordings on FedSupport's YouTube if you're interested. But one of the pieces that one of the speakers said was, don't get too hyper focused on your years of experience. Your years of experience are impressive and they matter, especially if you're someone who was in government for like 20, 25 years. But she finds sometimes working with executive job seekers or any job seeker, folks say, well, I have 15 years of experience, period. Focus on what expertise you have. So yes, you can state that you are seasoned and you have years of experience, but from that, your expertise is X, Y, and Z, and align it with the position to which you are seeking. It's not enough to have experience, but that expertise is what sets you apart. So I would just harken back to that piece of advice as well. Before I thank Sara and Kristen, I do just want to recognize that we are almost at time. We want to get your input for sessions going forward. We've had these FedSupport webinars for over a year now, and we want to continue to be responsive and supportive. So please answer these 4 short questions regarding your experience in the webinar, and those are going to pop up. You should be able to engage with those as we close out, but we really do value and prioritize whatever feedback you provide to set future webinar topics and resources that may be of interest to you. In many ways, that the Career Pivot Bootcamp was the result of what folks were asking for when they came to our FedSupport webinars and workshops. So I think Anushka was going to pull that slide up for the Career Pivot Bootcamp, for example, in case you are interested, but we just wanted to initiate that poll. I will also reiterate your responses are totally anonymous and will be used to inform future sessions. Before I conclude, I do just want to thank Sara so much. Sara is a friend of the partnership and again, an industry expert. But Sara, thank you for your time and your expertise and your perspective. It was so greatly appreciated and valuable. And just thank you on behalf of the partnership and all of the participants here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for joining today and for the great questions and discussion.
Wonderful. I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to close this out. Hopefully you all are doing your poll, but Kristen's going to share a few final remarks on our FedSupport efforts and how you can remain involved.
Yes, so we've alluded to FedSupport a few times throughout the webinar. We will continue to offer free webinars monthly, so check out the website that is in the chat. You can find our full schedule there. The webinars are always free. They're always recorded. So you can also scroll down on the webinars page to see our whole library of previous webinars that we have had. Also lots of resources there. From the FedSupport website, you can find our Career Pivot Bootcamp, which is that free asynchronous 7-module course. You can pick and choose the modules that resonate with you right now in your job search or career transition, but everything from how to incorporate AI into your search to negotiation, job search strategy, resumes, transitioning from a federal resume to a non-federal resume, all of that available to you. And you can also check out from FedSupport.org our Career Pivot Coaching, which is our paid product for one-on-one coaching. So if you would like a little more personalized support, that option is available to you, and we cover all of the topics that are a part of the career transition process, and it's really led by you and your goals, and we are here to support you. So thank you again for being with us today. You will receive a follow-up email with resources, and the link to this webinar will be available on that FedSupport site shortly. That is all we have
Thank you
for you.
all.